Welcome to this uncommon dialogue today between Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri and Amir Freimann. The title of today's uncommon dialogue is Insights into Surrender and Transcendence in the Sufi Tradition. Amir Freimann is a researcher into the reality of spirituality and an author of the book Spiritual Transmission, Paradoxes and Dilemmas on the Spiritual Path, for which he conducted many interviews with contemporary spiritual masters exploring the paradoxes and the dilemmas of this relationship. He's currently completing his doctorate on living transcendence. At the age of 16, Amir was bitten by the bug of seeking spiritual liberation. During the next 12 years, he studied medicine, even living in a Zen monastery for 2 years, before he met someone who would become his spiritual teacher for the next 21 years. Amir's interest in the guru-disciple relationship was triggered by these interests. Today, Amir Freimann will explore the first of two related areas that lie at the core of awakening or enlightenment, which is surrender. Surrender to God, to love, and to a spiritual master. And answering his questions is Shaykh Fadhlalla Haeri, another contemporary, acknowledged Sufi master, knitting the tradition with contemporary outlooks that absorb consciousness studies, as well as quantum physics and the living reality of the Sufi tradition in the modern world today. Amir Freimann, it's wonderful to have you here. Please, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Thank you, Shaykh Fadhlalla, for enabling this very exciting conversation exploration with you. We had an interview or two a few years ago when I interviewed you about the teacher-student relationship, and I'm very much looking forward to this conversation on the issue of surrender. Surrender to love, surrender to God, surrender to a spiritual master. I thought I'd start by reading a few quotes, which for me are very inspiring and really kind of a good way of introducing the subject. The first one is by an 11th, 12th century Jewish Spanish rabbi, philosopher, poet by the name of Yehuda Levi. 2 lines, very simple. The slaves of time are slaves of slaves. The slave of God alone is free. That's a very provocative statement for me, and something in me deeply resonates with that, with those 2 lines. Then I want to read two pieces from contemporary thinkers. One is a quote that I found in a book by psychologist Gerald May. The name of his book is Will and Spirit. And it actually starts, the very introduction starts like this. We all have secrets in our hearts. I will tell you one of mine. All my life, I have longed to say yes, to give myself completely to some ultimate someone or something. I kept this secret for many years because it didn't fit the image I wanted to present, that of an independent, self-sufficient man. The desire to surrender myself had been at least partially acceptable when I was a child. But as a man, I tried to put away childish things. When I became a physician and later a psychiatrist, it was still more difficult to admit, even to myself, that something in me was searching for an ultimate self-surrender. And the last quote is from a book by a researcher, psychologist by the name of Ethel Person, who wrote a very important book about the experience of falling in love. It's called Dreams of Love and Fateful Encounters, Romance in Our Time. It was written in the 80s. And I pulled out a few quotes from that book in which she says, the lover's purpose, like the mystics, is to achieve redemption through surrender. In surrender, the impulse is from within. Its purpose is self-purification or self-expansion through the transcending of the self and identification with the attributes of the other. No self-will stands between the lover and her secular God. This it shares with the religious impulse, and it yields the same gratification. So I'm very interested in the issue of surrender, in the impulse, the human impulse to surrender to something greater than one's agendas and fears and desires, the experience of surrender. I'm very interested in making a distinction between, shall we call it, authentic surrender and what we may call inauthentic surrender, or we could call it submission or obedience, which doesn't have the same flavor of self-transcending, uplifting, expanding, and releasing energy that surrender has. And I'm very interested to hear some of your about some of your experience of surrendering to, and also being the surrenderee to which other people experience surrender. So maybe we could start with some, if you would be willing to share with us some of your experiences of surrender, both in the context of surrender to God, to Allah, and also in the context of surrender to a master or a guru or a sheikh.
I've been very fortunate in my life in that I had an easy flow within this amazing tunnel of special energy field, which we call surrender. It's like any other spectrum of, if you like, of experiences or of understanding or of consciousness. It's a spectrum. So if I am in pain of hunger, I give into that field, which has a very clear way to balance it. In other words, to try and find something to eat and reduce that hunger and so on. And there are thousands of experiences each one of us can count in that we were caught on a knot, whether it is anxiety, whether it's concern, whether it is fear, or whether it is sorrow, whether it is illness, or whether it is pain, and on and on. So we have no option other than trying to remedy it. We have no option other than trying to balance it. We have no option other than trying to bring oneself, one's consciousness or dominant consciousness as a living being into a point of balance and neutrality. That's what we all the time aim for. And all my life, I remember as a kid, whatever I wanted, either get it or change it or modify it so that I experience again that point of neutrality. So I grew up in an ambience or in a situation where religious practices were for this purpose, were to be relieved of physical, biological, chemical, emotional burdens and fears and so on. So I was very fortunate, as I said earlier. And I had it very easy. And the biggest shock in my life was to actually see an Indian guru who was very much in this world. He has just emerged from a series of talks. And yet my innermost somewhat told me of something else about him, in that although he is doing all of this, he is not the doer. He is not afflicted. He is not engaged in a tunnel vision or in an emotional way, whatever. He could just turn away from it and is the same. Again, we use often these words of freedom or emancipation. It's something else. Then I was very fortunate to come across the key ayahs in the Quran and other teachings that showed me clearly that whatever we experience in this life is one of two. It's either clear or neutral or engaged or caught um, or encumbered or whatever. One of two. We are either awake or asleep. Of course, within sleep, there are many degrees as well. And within wakefulness also, there are many, again, another spectrum of intensity and clarity. So I was very fortunate in realizing that the purpose in this life is to see the two, respond to the two, good and the bad and the up and the down and just and the unjust, and yet see the light of oneness that has brought about this duality. And this to me had been for many years now as the real purpose of everybody's life, every individual's life. Your purpose is to acknowledge duality because you are in that stream, you are in that zone of duality, born and dead, good and bad, acceptable and rejectable, and so on. And yet, the higher in you, the source in you, the cosmic light and life source in you, God in you, or any other name you like to give it, is one. So accept the duality because you are a human and you like it or you don't like it. But then refer to the reality in you, the light of the one in you, which shows you that, yes, this is part of it. At the moment, you don't like it, but later on is good for you. Or you like it now, and later on you will dislike it, and so on and so forth. So it's many years now since I have a very simple model that duality is the gateway to unity. And every human being is subjected to it. And higher consciousness of animals also, they touch it. But the human consciousness in our little, if you like, earthly experience seems to be much clearer on this issue. And if we do that, then I think you have performed your duty. All religious practices, spiritual practices are there to reduce the impact of saving yourself, preserving yourself, or prolonging your life, and all of the usual animal tendencies in us, in order for you to then end up a bit neutral, not too scared of losing life or defending yourself or being safe or acquiring or whatever. Now you're a bit more neutral. Then you enter into this vast horizon of wanting to do your best in a manner that lasts forever, because we are caught within space and time. And we want to get out of this illusory prison, because the soul is not in space and time. It's boundless. It has in it aspects of cosmic qualities beyond the mind to comprehend. So to get back to the question is that I don't think there is anything really to surrender, because who are you? What did you acquire? Who had given it to you? It's only intelligence that tells you be more and more open to the higher reality, and then the lower realities will unravel. It is real that I want to be content within my body, within my mind, within my heart, within my emotions, within my internal chemistry and hormonal, and it is true. But all of these are subservient to the state that I want to constantly touch upon. And that state is of healthy, positive neutrality that gives me a direct experience of presence. of real, boundless presence in the infinite moment. Because the soul is from an infinite, boundless source. Its shadow, which is the so-called I, which leads to it, is anxious all the time to be at one with that oneness, to be at one with the source. In truth, it is, but it doesn't know it because it has a mind of its own. The ego, the outer me, the second me, the animal me, has a fickle mind until that mind gives in to the light of the soul itself. Then it is not a haphazard mind. It is perfection in that moment. Perfection upon perfection, and carries on and on and on forever. It has emerged from the pool of foreverness, and it's connected to that at all times. So my take on all of these issues of surrender, accept, give in, transcend, awaken, all of them are legitimate in their different ways for the novice. But you reach a point in life that you just touch the moment and you are intoxicated by that moment and its perpetual nature, and you just hang on to that. Occasionally, of course, earlier on, you lose that and you become again quite upset for having lost it, and you think, God has forsaken you or whatever, or you become disappointed with yourself, and on and on and on, until such time it is the extent that you merge conditioned consciousness, which is the so-called you, the biographical you, the ever-changing you, the you that began as a tiny little dot in the womb and will also be left in uncertainty that the body is buried, the mind is gone, and the soul has disappeared into the unseen. So once you surrender the so-called you and this limited conditioned consciousness into infinite consciousness, then you have unified the outer and the inner and the apparent and the non-apparent and the bovine you and the divine you. And that's again, I think, the main reason of life on earth. If you have done that, then you have no fear of death. You know already that part of you that is going to die is celebrating its return and its death. And the part of you that is light, that is not subject to space and time limitations, is ever alive. And that these are the meaning of the people on the path, like so many of the Sufis. The moment or the day of death is considered the day of wedding, because now you are truly wedded to your own soul, that which is your real soul mate. And that's why on the outer world, which is a practice, everybody's looking for their soulmate. And the fool also, he said, I really knew eventually I'll find her. I found her now. Stupid. It just shows another level of ignorance, because we want to be neutralized. We want to be successful. The soul is beyond success. It's ever victorious. The word success or failure doesn't enter into its dictionary. But the shadow, the so-called I, wants to succeed. The child wants to succeed and wants to be seen succeeded. That's why the child wants the parents to watch him or her doing well at sport or at the academic, whatever. It is the ego. But the ego ultimately really is a shadow of that perfect light, the sun in you. But it has to be eclipsed before you can see it. And what eclipses the sun in you or the soul in you is the ego or the self. And that's what most people denounce and suffer from. But actually, without your ego, you won't exist. Without that shadow, the light is immense, it's impossible. So, Amir, this is really all what I know. And I think it's very simple. And it doesn't in any way contradict any real, genuine religion or spiritual paths. So the only thing is that you need guides along this path. The first guide is your mother, to keep you alive by feeding you or cuddling you, and on and on and on. And you need guides. Until not long ago, because of the society's restriction in terms of mobility and based on land, and so until 100, 200 years ago, you had to hopefully have somebody within that land who is a bit more awakened than you or your parents. So you try to look into that mirror to see the real you, and so on and so on. But those eras have passed. 100 years ago, you needed to find someone and give allegiance to them and belong to that, if you like, particular, setup or situation to save yourself from yourself, to save yourself from all of the uncertainties of the ego and the mind and its whims. But I think we have come to a situation of evolution in the sense of higher and higher consciousness. But nowadays, you may need also guides, you may need help, but it won't be exclusive. It will be inclusive. This is how I read the situation.
That's a very comprehensive picture you drew there. I'd like to ask you about a few points that you mentioned, which relate to the issue of surrender. Maybe I'll start with 2 points that to me are related. One is you mentioned that when you met this Indian guru, you felt that he operated in the world, but there wasn't a doer. So the question is, if there wasn't a doer, who was doing, or what was driving the carriage? Who was the driver in that person?
The Quran gives you the answer. It says there were occasions in which beings like the Prophet or like this guru or many others, including yourself maybe, that suddenly you do something and you think the potency and the grace in that doingship was beyond you. So the Quran says, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. It's more or less as though responding to a surprise, which is our imagination, of the Prophet, that he threw something which was a weapon or dust or whatever it was the occasion in the eyes of the enemy. He says, it is not you who threw. It is وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. So the answer is there. It says, direct from the source that power came. That's why also inspirations are at so many different levels. So in the case of this guru, if you maintain this state that you are not the doer, you are a conduit, you are an instrument, you are an earthly manifestation, then you have no fear or anxiety that whether your talk or your lecture or your whatever initiation was accepted or rejected or not. In other words, you go back again to the original teachings, which is in most religions, that the awakened or the enlightened person is he or she who is the same in the when he or she is censored or admired and respected. It doesn't mean you don't realize that people now are content with what you said and they grasp it or they reject it. You understand that, but it doesn't afflict your innermost. You're aware this is not an environment that you like to stay, or they will understand. So thank them and thank yourself and recognize you misjudged the situation and have an inner smile and an outer, if you like, straight face and leave. That's it. In other words, you remain in the moment. If you don't remain in the moment, you are slipping. You are losing your connection with the eternal source of life cosmically. And if you do that, then you are disconnected and you suffer and you feel low energy of that, if you like, grace. So the doer is one. The doer is the cosmic source that is beyond time, beyond space, and from it arises zillions of beams of what we call, if you like, universes. So each universe, each spot has its own cosmology, their lifespan, their cycle, their response to all of the amazing changes that goes on in the universe above us, and all of the light energy sources that affect us, and so on and so on. There are zillions of forms of life, and ours has a consciousness that can reflect upon itself, reflection upon reflection upon reflection. And that is what is amazing in it. So if you calibrate with that, then even though you are the doer, you are the planner, you have decided this and so on, but you are given this license for you to again test yourself, see yourself, experiment, so that you perfect the art of being here but not of here, acting without being the actor, except through license, except on a short leash, except through your willingness to immediately lift your hand and say, La ilaha illa ant subhanaka inni kuntu min al-zalimin. There is none other than you, I wronged myself. So that is the story.
Would you say that, you spoke about the source of light that is eclipsed by the personality or the conditioned self? Would you say that source of light has a will, that it wants you as a personality, as a limited individual, to act in a certain way, that there is a plan or an agenda that it has for the world, for humanity?
In our limited language, you can say yes, but in truth, it has no desire and no agenda. If there is an agenda, it is to be known, to be discovered, is to be at one with, is for the whole cosmos to constantly yield to it at every level of consciousness. So if there is a God will, it is that. It's to be known, it's to be adored, it's to be worshipped, meaning to be at one with it. To worship something, you must first know its nature, that it is immense, it is vast, it is all powerful, it is all majestic, it's all beautiful. And then that takes you into love, which is a big unifying factor. And through that, you become obsessed with it. That is the beginning of worship, obsession. I don't want anything else other than it. Then I realized there was only it. There was no so-called I. This was the hook, if you like, that really had to be in its place. As I said earlier, it is like the eclipsed sun. I can then look at it, but the sun itself I can't look at. So God has to be shielded through the so-called self, has to be the shield of the soul or of the spirit in me. So initially, as a toddler, as a growing up, somebody would say, look, you'll suffer, your ego and so on, you want everybody to admire you. But later on, when you begin to wake up to the truth that there is only your spirit or soul, which is a ray of or a spark from God himself, you realize that your ego and your lower self or your animal self was actually necessary for you to begin to move about and muck about and make mistakes and so on. So you've come full circle to realize there is only that cosmic light. And we can say with our limitation as humans that cosmic light wants to attract anything in consciousness that's high enough to be at one with it, because there is only it. So that's how it is.
Well, has there been any point in your own spiritual journey, in your own life, where you felt you had to make a certain choice to let go of some aspects of yourself, renounce, give up, let go of, for the sake of something higher?
In a way, yes, but the main thing, the main drive in my life had been that I don't want to suffer. I don't want to have regrets. I don't want to have guilt. So I would say for many, many years before if I had a choice, before I did it, quite in a spontaneous way, I will look at the worst outcome and how much will I regret it and how much will I suffer, and whether also that path is reversible, because the soul is free and the self wants that. We want to be free. So the self also, the ego, will also tell me, is it easy for you to regret, to come out of it and apologize and so on? What is the cost? So I think as long as I can remember, really, this process was very spontaneous, not a very clear one that now we have a choice of A and B, and if you choose A, these what, and if you choose, I hardly remember that. That very formal type of evaluation. But I had made many mistakes. I still do, and I enjoy them. Actually, they're fun, but they're not big. They're just whether I should have eaten half a spoon more or less, or whether I should have rested before, or whether I should have answered or apologized, whatever. Simple things which don't take you away too far away from the now, but so until it becomes really just the now, and you even have no more memory. If you are all the time in the now, you are in the now. You repeat the same thing if you were given that chance 20 times more. But earlier on, I think what you said, Amir, is you need to evaluate. That's why you need guidance from wise people and so on, and on until you move from physical, literal, earthly, human wisdom into higher wisdom. And then you find all of these were actually signposts along the path. None of these are of any consequence. Mm-hmm. The ultimate wisdom is to constantly calibrate with the timelessness in you. Otherwise, it is again short-lived and it has a lot of goodness and some badness. We don't want that. We want a zone that is beyond goodness and badness. We want to all the time calibrate with the absolute. So long as you are in the relative, you are in the relative, and it's fine. But not until you're all the time calibrating with where there is no good or bad, and no time and no beginning and no end. Then I think you have fulfilled, if you like, your earthly journey or the spirit's earthly journey. And if you stay longer or shorter, it really doesn't matter much more. And the Quran describes that the beings like that, they have no fear of death, and nor will they ever grieve. It doesn't mean you don't empathize with people's sorrow or emotional upset. No, you do, but it doesn't overwhelm you. Mm-hmm. It's just an instant. You understand that, if you like, feeling, because you have had a lot of occasions of touching it and so on. So you are still human, but having attained fully, constantly, enjoyably, cheerfully, celebratorily, the fact that in truth you are a spark from that cosmic truth itself.
Well, I want to ask you a very personal question about myself. I've been exposed to the Son of Light, in your words, more than I could ask for. And I have lost fear of death because of that. I feel that my life for the last 20 or 30 years has been kind of bonus. I don't really deserve it because I've already fulfilled everything I could ask for on this earth. And yet, I find that my favorite posture in this body is when my forehead touches the ground. In submission or surrender and gratitude and obedience to something which is greater than this body and this personality and with everything that's included in it. Do you feel that this longing, or it's not a longing, it's an expression of, to me, it's the healthiest, most sane posture for a human being to be in surrender and to be in service of something greater than oneself. Does that make sense to you?
The only thing that makes sense. Again, putting one's head down, putting oneself down, and being modest and being, all of it is an implication or shows that one is turning away from the lower self, from the ego self, from the shadow self. It is a necessary condition. This is part of the process. I can share with you that what I really benefited a lot from is the issue of duality. Nothing ever exists unless it's one of two. And some years ago, I questioned when the womb, being in the womb and being born from a mother is one. Where is the other one? It was very clear, and I've been living that for many years now, that the second womb is this earthly womb with space and time as the containment, and the illusion that there is a you, and you have to do something with and for this so-called you, until you are born out of this, or ejected out of this, or awakened from this, if you like, illusion. So the so-called you, the real you, is the light that has been driving the so-called you, and trying to make sense out of this, trying to be correct, and giving you also occasionally sorrow and feeling of regrets, or even whatever. So it's self-correcting until the state you've mentioned now is you're not the only one. You're one of the billions of ones. So it may be that you continue in this life not for you. If you have truly, fully attained that constant unison with the absolute oneness, but there may be millions of other situations that may benefit you. Maybe one of the benefits is for us today, have this wonderful conversation and enjoy ourselves on this earth. We just entered into a certain patch of a garden on this earth, talking about situations and aspects that are not limited to space and time, whilst we are still limited to space and time. So you don't know for who it is. It's an amazing, if you like, integrative reality at infinite levels. So we don't know who will benefit, what child will see you, what mother will benefit, what business, what politician who will hear you. We don't know. So if you have done your best, good, now keep it at that. Be careful, because nothing ever stays so long as it's within space and time. So that is why also the wise people, if they make mistakes and faults, it's far worse than others. So many so-called religious or spiritual peoples also have made errors that have caused greater catastrophes than many of the common criminals. So we have to, modesty never ends. We have to be careful. Say, no, I've done this a million. I've stayed upside down. I was hanged in a well for 40 days without food. So what? You never know. Watch out. Allah says in the Quran, He says, I am the ultimate trickster of all. You can never catch me, because I envelop everything that is quote and unquote. So it is a mysterious reality. So you have to be always on vigilance, no matter who you are, no matter how many millions of people declared you as enlightened, awakened, prophetic. Watch out.
Well, what would help you in watching out? Because because we human beings are very good at deceiving ourselves and compromising and thinking that we are not compromising, and so how, especially if you are in a high position and many people consider you a luminary or an adept or an expert in the field of spirituality, well, who would help you avoid such pitfalls of self-deceit?
Yourself. We have a beautiful supplication from one of our great masters. It is Ali Zain Abdin. He says, "Oh Allah, don't let me hear people putting me up in my station of spirituality or whatever they consider that I know or I am ahead of them. Do not allow me to hear that. unless you make me within my own heart put myself lower than the height that they put me to balance it. So you yourself, think of yourself at the moment of death. Think of yourself that the air goes in, may not come out. There are hundreds of techniques to make you humble within your own heart.
Yes.
I remember one day one great being, actually, he was acknowledged as being the ultimate top in his field. And the story was that he had such a standing ovation for something like 20 minutes that he had to dash to the toilet. He said, I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and I wept for 10 minutes out of, out of humility. So you have to do it yourself. Lower yourself back and there, do something that is very mundane, and feed the ants or talk to the cat or whatever. Otherwise, it goes into your head. You said, don't you know who I am? What do you mean, who are you? You're an animal hanging on air. Millions of activities are taking place within your body and mind, and you are not aware of it. Any minute, you may leave your body. So watch out. These are other human beings undergoing this ecliptic, if you like, process, being born and they're dying, and nobody wants to die or afraid of death. They're the same. So watch out, be courteous, be correct. We are differentiated sameness. Everyone else, in a sense, essentially is the same. You look at any other human being, they're the same. They want the same thing. They want certainty, they want security, they want to be in the now. But they haven't had the privilege that you and I may have had to realize that now is all what there is. The past is faint memory and is gone. The future is the accumulation and all of the other factors that are in, and I will experience it. Part of it may be that I had hoped for, part of it maybe I didn't expect. We don't know. You can never be certain. The only certainty, if you transcend space and time, that is the state of your own soul or God's light in you. And that's why we are obsessed with it. So it's humility by self-humility. Put yourself. If you are lucky, you still have a teacher, whatever who is accessible, he or she may have to do that initially. Until such time, they say, look here, now you're sufficiently self-sufficient. And, hopefully in that split second, you're aware of you're now becoming arrogant or self-conscious or whatever. That's all. That's why I think we are heading as human beings towards a wonderful zone in the coming future. More and more people will be self-awakened, will be referencing with other like-minded, like-hearted people, and there may well be teachers around also as a reference, as a, I think we are heading towards the more vertical state in human beings, towards the higher, rather than horizontal. What do the neighbors say? What do the village chief says? Or what does the guru says? There are hardly any visible. No self-respecting guru would like to be known. Say, thank you very much, go somewhere else. I am basking in the glory of my perfect timelessness, so don't disturb me. Thank you very much.
Yes. That's beautiful. Thank you. I want to ask you, you have some people who call themselves your students or disciples and who relate to you as their spiritual guide. Do you find that some of them long to surrender to you? And how do you relate to such a motivation or an impulse?
Avoid it. As a youngster, of course, loving power, I thought this is wonderful. If I have 10 million people looking up to me, surrendering me, I'm quite a good king. Then I realized the nafs and the self or the ego is impossible, absolutely impossible. Then I realized that God has saved me from creating a movement or a community or whatever, or a new guruship. And I also felt deep in me that the times, evolutionary-wise, have passed. We don't need that anymore. You need friends, so I consider anybody who comes to me as a so-called student, I consider them as a friend. But again, friends are, there is a friend and a friend and a friend. You know, you befriend a child, you befriend a teenager, so I consider them as potentially the same as I. And what saved me, I think, a lot was from childhood being brought up in an ambience that I considered, or we considered, the family, whoever is alive has to be revered because there is life in there. And this life is a spark of the cosmic light itself. So there is godhood in there. They don't know it. So I had this genuine respect for others. And so the otherness became thinner and thinner and thinner, became all one, the same. They're the same as I, you know, culturally skewed differently, time-wise, age-wise, exposure, whatever. So I consider any human being the same as I, no matter how good or bad or criminal they are. They've just been subjected to different environments, and they're now actually drug addicts or die-hard criminals. Avoid them. You know, you will suffer, and you don't want to suffer, but do not denounce them. He or she had been moored aside to these situations that they've ended up being worse than any animal. So getting back to your question, I consider the age we are in now, you need friends to look up to at different degrees. You need someone who can advise you in your career and your work, and someone who can advise you more in terms of maybe relationships and how do you behave towards your family, your parents, your children, and you need somebody also as a reference when you are reaching the top of the mountain. Earlier on, as a skier, it doesn't matter, you fall and you hurt a bit your bum and so on, you get up. But what about you're now skiing up on the top of the mountain and hurricanes may come any minute? You now need access to a guide who has had all of the ups and downs of the dangers of the top of the mountain. It's for that reason to have access to someone whom you trust, that spiritually they have gone beyond the norm. They're accessing the absolute perpetually without denying the relative. They can't say, I am now in another world. No, you're still here. The whole spectrum is here, there, everywhere, and nowhere, the absolute. So I think we're moving into a zone in life that whoever likes to collect students and followers who are devoted and who do fana fi Shaykh, there may still be quite few in remote places and in villages and so on. It was a luxury, really, to find somebody who say, I'm not going to move unless you tell me. Poor fellow, I think, I don't want to be that. Every minute they send you a message, especially now with billions of cell phones. Can I go to the toilet or no? Sure, I've been to the toilet already, but I feel I have to go again. What do you mean? Well, you have to live your life. You have to have your own miserable little kingdom to deal with it, and then realize that there is a King of Kings who has ruled over the whole thing and has given you a touch of that minor mini kingdom. So I think it still persists. People like to delegate. Say, look, I'm a follower of so-and-so, poor so-and-so. I really feel sorry for such a teacher or such a guru. But God knows best. He puts them in a certain situation, and that's how it is. I mean, I may have been put in that situation. I would have had to accept it because I like neutrality. I want to accept me. I don't want to reject me. I don't want others to reject me. So how about me?
So if a student comes to you and asks to surrender, would you regard it as a mistake on their part?
No, the mistake was being born. I think that's the ultimate mistake. And worse than that is to fear death. I think that's the second worst mistake. No, I say, all right, look, but the days have gone. You can take me as a friend. You can take me as a mirror, if that mirror is available to you, to look at yourself in that mirror. Because I may have had more experience than you in how to clean my mirror, how to clear it of my egos and fears and my lower self. So it may be clearer for you. If it is, good luck. And there may be other mirrors for you. Or you may consider in your own heart, I am the only real mirror that you refer to ultimately. This is your business. I don't want to have that, sort of loyalty and allegiance and a ceremony of that era has passed. Initiation, they were necessary before. But human consciousness has risen. Your consciousness, your spirit, your soul is exactly the same as mine. My soul is not better. The soul of the prophet is not greater than mine. The only difference is that he had no self, no ego, no shadow. So his soul was brilliant. And that's what I like. So I think we have come as humanity to a new zone where we still want mirrors. We still want friends. We still want references. And to revere also and to love. That's fine. But the days of having a little community and so on, and like they're all together and so on, is over. Consciousness has risen. Evolution has taken place. Now you need friends who are spiritually higher than you. The same thing as you need friends whose earthly knowledge or ability to whatever skills they have is higher than you. It's endless. Everywhere I look, there are people who are more skilled than I am, but fine. But in terms of the soul and spirit, when I see somebody who is truly accessing that innermost all the time, I said, this is worth it. This is what I really want. Because if you are at that moment, you have no wants anymore. Then you are truly liberated from the illusion that there is other than the light of your own soul in.
Thank you. Thank you. This is beautiful.
You see, we enjoyed ourselves, so that's why I think we still have been given this reason to stay around.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is not complete.
For that.
See, it's not complete. You are not finished. You had.
Well, I want to keep. I have another whole subject that I want to explore with you, which is about the ultimate stages of the spiritual journey. Fana fila wa baka bila fila. And
if I die from my illusions, as I've been growing up with it, I am this and I'm that and I'm better than others. Everybody thinks they are better than others many a time, and so on and so on. If I die to these fantasies, biographical illusions, then I am born into the reality of the absolute. That is fana fillah and baqa billah. But if you like, we can have a session on that whenever. Or if you like to take the summary I've just given, leaving the shadows, there's more light. So there are degrees of shadows, until such time it is the light that is there, but occasionally a small little shadow passes. That's about, if you like, Plato's cave. But it is a true process. It is real. I mean, I appreciate your question and your issue. It is that giving up one's affair. We all have emotions, and the mother has got a huge advantage giving up so much of her own, if you like, desires or wishes for the child, for survival, for life. Life is the manifestation of the absolute. So it is a process. We have to also allow it. And that's why people love to serve, find an excuse to help those who are less fortunate. The unfortunate situation is that we still are in need. Until such time, the real you has no needs, but the so-called you, the earthly you, the shadow of the real you, keeps on having needs. Ultimately, you come to know that the real need you have is to have no need.
Yes.
But this is a wonderful life process. For that, you need really also teachers and helpers and people like Amir who can write and who can help others. So I think this is again grace. This is grace upon grace. That here we are having so many people having enabled us to be together in cyberspace. Isn't that wonderful? Without having to also carry our hulk through aeroplanes and through other things, mess about more. But here we are, connected at the highest level of consciousness. I think this in itself is a big gift. This proves the presence of the divine.
Yes.
Amongst millions of other proofs.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
It was a
Amir.
delight being with you.
Thank you, Shaykh.
Please tell him to stay alive. We want more of this. Sort of, we want to have fun. People like him are, that not that common. So it's we want to be with special people.
Okay.
Well, I think if we schedule another session to talk about fana, about this kind of annihilation of the self, and how does that look like, I think that will be a reason to carry on living, perhaps. Yes, Amir?
Keep us going.
Bismillah, bismillah.
Thank you very much, both of you, for wonderfully creating this special space in which we have managed to contemplate how, evolutionarily speaking, the reality of surrender is. And I find it very fascinating because the Sufi path is, central to the Sufi path is this notion of surrender to a master, that it is the sine qua non of the path, that you must have that engagement. And the classical model was based on the fact that you should be like a rag in the hands of the washer of the dead. It's a very absolutist model. And yet it's, and according to what Shaykh Fadhlalla has now been unpacking for us, it's no longer sustainable. And there's an evolutionary process in human consciousness going along here, and you're going to get that sustenance in different ways without really denying the reality and the need of those mirrors. So thank you so much for updating this concept and this notion. Alhamdulillah. Thank you both. And I look forward to the second part of this wonderful uncommon dialogue between the two of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaykh Fadhlalla. Stay well, stay alive till the next time. Thank you.